In this video, I'm going to show you how to master audio using Adobe Premiere Pro. The audio that you're listening to right now has already been mastered using Premiere. I've applied a number of effects and I've also adjusted the audio levels using the Audio Meter, which helps me get the correct level when uploading to YouTube, all of which I'm going to show you how to do later on in this tutorial. But before we get onto that, the first thing I wanted to talk about was the use of your equipment and the setup prior to recording, which is really important and will ensure that you get the best possible results when mastering. So first of all, if possible, always try and use an external microphone. I'm using a Canon EOS R and I've got a Rode NT1 with a Zoom handy recorder set up here that's recording the audio separately. Then I grab the two SD cards, put them into the computer, and I synchronize the video with the audio file, and then I start editing the audio. So that's my process, my workflow for recording audio. The other thing to consider is the proximity of the mic. So I generally record at about this distance, which is anywhere from 10 to 15 centimeters away. And that helps with a number of things. First of all, it ensures that the vocal is direct and impactful. And it also helps reduce echo and room noise. And that's going to vary depending on where you're shooting. This particular space that I'm shooting in right now is not the best environment for audio. It isn't sound treated at all. So there's a lot of reflection and echo in the space. So by getting closer to the microphone, it helps eliminate that awful room noise. Now, there are things you can do in Premiere to reduce room noise. We'll touch upon it in the edit. But the more you can do up front to remove that type of issue, the better the result will be in the end. So having said all that, let's go ahead and start editing our audio using Premiere Pro. Okay, so we're in Premiere Pro in the main interface, and if you're not quite seeing the same layout as I have on screen right now, go to the Window menu, Workspaces, and select All Panels. Now we're going to drag the face to camera footage onto video layer number 1. And we're going to drag the audio track onto audio layer number 2. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I tend to record all of my videos using a DSLR camera or the mirrorless Canon EOS R, and I record my vocals separately into the Zoom H6 audio recorder. So we've got the two different files that we need to synchronize. So you can drag them onto the timeline, one on top of the other. Then select them both and right click on the files and select synchronize. Then in the pop-up window that appears, select audio and OK. And this will now synchronize the audio files together. You can see the amplitude of my audio file here. If you're not seeing that, use the horizontal slider to enlarge the content on the timeline and the vertical sliders to enlarge them vertically so that you get a better view of your content. So now we can see the thumbnail view of the video and we can see the waveform of the audio quite clearly. If you're still not seeing those, click on the spanner tool and make sure you've got show video thumbnails and show audio waveform enabled. So now that we've synchronized our audio, we want to go and add some effects in order to master the audio. Let's just go to the workspaces again, and now we're going to change over to audio whilst we're editing the audio of this project. When you do that, you'll see the interface changes and all of the effects and track mixer, everything you need to edit your audio appears on screen. On the right-hand side, you'll see the Essential Sound Control panel, which makes it really easy to edit your audio by just dragging an effect, dialogue, music, sound effects, and ambience onto the audio layer of your project. But we're not going to use this process in the demonstration today because I want to show you how you can master your audio in a manual process, which gives you a much higher degree of control over the edit. So let's ignore the Essential Control panel for now. And we're going to rely on adding effects using our track mixer. So you might see the audio clip mixer when you first switch over to the audio workspace. If that's the case, click on the next tab along so that you get to the audio track mixer. And the benefit of using the audio track mixer over here is that if we make edits to the original audio file, all of those effects will still be applied to the overall track rather than applying them to the individual clips on the timeline. So any audio file that is placed on track 2 is going to be affected by all of the changes that we make here in the audio track mixer. So as you can see, we've got track number 1 muted because we're not using it. So we're going to apply all of our effects on track 2 over here. So to do that, we're going to click on the first slot available in the track mixer by hovering over the small triangular icon, clicking on it, and we can then select from a whole range of effects available for our audio. Now I'm going to click on play on the timeline just to listen to my audio first. And by the way, when you're mastering audio, it probably goes without saying, you really need to have a set of headphones so that you can hear the audio clearly and understand what's actually going on with the audio and what you need to be doing in order to address any issues with your audio file. So on first listening, it sounds quite decent, but the first problem we have is the amplitude of the audio. In order to increase that, we can simply drag the horizontal slider on the timeline up to 15 decibels so that it's louder. We can then go into our effects rack over here and add our first effect. One thing I noticed about the audio is that it has a fair degree of reverb. So we're going to use the de-reverb filter that's available in the noise reduction restoration drop-down menu. And we'll click on de-reverb. Now, if you have a noisy audio file, whether that be because of the environment you're recording in or whether your microphone has a fair degree of line noise, you can also add the denoise filter and click on that and adjust the amount slider until you remove the noise. But if you are using noise reduction, keep in mind that the higher you go, the more artificial the recording can sound, as the noise filter can often cut into the natural characteristics of your vocal. Fortunately, I don't have to use a noise filter for this, but I do have the reverb that's present in my room to deal with, so I'm going to use the de-reverb filter instead. Click on that, and once again, the same principle applies. If you go higher than 50, it's going to give you an artificial sound. So we're going to adjust the slider to around the 40% mark and take a listen now, which I'm going to show you how to do later on in this tutorial. But before we get onto that, the first thing I wanted to talk about was the use of your equipment and the setup. So there's the audio without the filter applied prior to recording, which is really important and will ensure that you get the best possible results when mastering. So first of all, if possible, always try and use an external mic. Now we could probably go a little bit higher, up to around the 50% mark. So let's try that now. Microphone. I'm using a Canon EOS R and I've got a Rode NT1. It's probably a little bit aggressive, so I'll bring that back to around 45%. Okay, so the first thing we've done is to remove some of that reverb. The next thing we're going to do is to click on the next available slot in the track mixer. We're going to go into amplitude and compression and we'll click on dynamics. Now the dynamics processor can be used in its entirety by applying a gate, a compressor, and an expander, or you can just use one or any one of the components of this filter. You've also got some presets. So for example, we could go with a hard compression option. Let's take a listen to that. Bluetooth microphone or a wired microphone, that will ensure you get good quality audio. Or if you're using any type of camera, you can choose whatever microphone setup you want to use. Or we could use it as a noise gate by clicking on the noise gate preset. So a gate in audio terms is pretty much what the name implies. It's as though you're opening a gate to allow audio to flow through and then closing it based on a certain threshold that you can adjust using these parameters. So what we're trying to do is when the audio gets below a certain level, rather than allow it to continue to play, we want to cut it off completely. And this helps us eliminate additionally some more room noise, reverb, and reflections from the room itself that go into the microphone. and also any noise that might be present in the audio. And if you're podcasting with multiple guests, this can be really effective in helping remove secondary and third vocals coming into the original microphone. So let's just take a listen to the audio with the gate applied. Of the mic. So I generally record at about this distance, which is anywhere from 10 to 15 centimeters away. And that helps with a number of things. First of all, so you'll notice that when I go quiet, it just completely cuts out the audio. As soon as I stop talking, it cuts out all audio, including the background noise. So it kind of helps clean up the recording and makes it more present and impactful. The only issue with the preset that I've applied is that it seems to be cutting out a little bit too much, so that it's cutting into the higher frequencies and it sounds a little bit unnatural. So in order to change that, we're going to adjust the threshold. It was set to -23. We're going to bring it back to around -32, maybe 33. And we're also going to increase the hold time and increase the release a little bit as well. And that might help make it sound a little bit more natural. Let's take a listen now. That I'm shooting in right now is not the best environment for audio. It isn't sound treated at all. So there's a lot of reflection and echo in the space. So by getting closer to the microphone, it helps eliminate that awful room noise. Now, if you prefer to have a more natural sound that includes breaths and doesn't sound as processed, then you can avoid using this particular effect. However, if you use it wisely and if you're careful with the threshold, attack, and release settings, then I think it can deliver a really good result. So I'm quite happy with that, and as such, I'm going to leave it in the rack. So thus far, we've applied the de-reverb and dynamics effects. Now we're going to go and add a compressor. To do that, click on the next slot available, scroll down and click on amplitude and compression, and we'll select the multi-band compressor. Double click on that. And then we can use one of the available presets. Broadcast is probably one of the better ones. So let's take a listen to that. The audio separately. Then I grab the two SD cards, put them into the computer, and I synchronize the video with the audio file. And then I start editing the audio. So that's my process, my workflow for recording audio. Yours could be a little bit different to that. If you have an iPhone and you have an external Bluetooth microphone or a wired microphone, that will ensure you get good quality audio. Or if you're using any type of camera, you can choose whatever microphone setup you want to use. Record it directly into the camera, but you're generally going to get better results when you're using an external microphone. Okay, that's sounding pretty good. The next thing you could look at doing is adding a de-esser, and this helps minimize some sibilance that appears in the recording audio. Yours could be a little bit different to that. If you have an iPhone and you have an external Bluetooth microphone or a wired microphone, that will ensure you get good quality audio. Or if you're using any type of camera, you can choose whatever microphone setup you want to use. Now, if I click on the output sibilance only checkbox, you'll get a preview of the noise that's actually being removed from the audio. The vocal is direct and impactful, and it also helps reduce echo and room noise, and that's going to vary depending on where you're shooting. This particular space that I'm shooting in right now is not the best environment for audio. It isn't sound treated at all, so there's a lot of reflection and echo in the space. So by getting closer to the microphone. Now, if you want that really aggressive podcast sound, or if you just need to make sure that the vocal stands completely above the mix when you have a background music track playing, or if you just want to really give the most impactful impression with the audio, I would highly recommend adding a hard limiter. So to do that, we're going to add amplitude and compression hard limiter as the fourth effect in our rack. And we're going to double click on that and select the -1 dB limiter. So this is going to bring up and level out the audio as much as it can to around -1 decibels. Let's take a listen. Later on in this tutorial. But before we get onto that, the first thing I wanted to talk about was the use of your equipment and the setup prior to. Now we're just going to reduce the input boost because I can see we're going into the red there. Try that one more time. The recording, which is really important and will ensure that you get the best possible results when mastering. Okay, so that sounds pretty good to the ear. You can see on the levels on the right-hand side, the audio seems to be at about the right level, but how do we know what the actual sound level should be and whether it's compliant with the standards of the particular platform that we're going to be authoring for? For example, this video needs to be published to YouTube, and YouTube actually have on their website a page which describes the specification and requirements for audio on their platform so that the audio can be unadulterated and not leveled up or down in any way. So if you want the best possible sound when authoring to YouTube, for example, we can take advantage of the loudness level meter in Premiere Pro in order to see how loud our audio actually is. So to do that, we're going to add one more effect, and it's the loudness meter. Now, if I try and add it into the next slot in track number 2, you can see that it doesn't allow me to add any more effects because we've already added 5. So don't worry about that. In order to add additional effects, we can apply them to the mix track, which is the output audio of what's on the timeline in this Premiere project. So I'm going to click on this first slot in the mix track, and I'm going to go down to Special and select Loudness Meter. Now you can see there's a loudness radar option as well. That's a very similar type of measuring tool that you can use to check the level of your audio. But for this example, we're going to use a loudness meter. If you want to see how it's done with a loudness radar option instead, I've also created a video on that, and I'll leave a link to it in the description box below. But for this example, we're going to use the loudness meter. So to adjust the parameters of the loudness meter, let's click on it and configure it correctly for our requirements. So the best way to do this is to click on your preset option, scroll down and find the particular loudness level that you're measuring against. So if you're producing a podcast for Apple, you'd select Apple Podcast. If you're mastering a CD, the CD master. If you're producing a video that might appear in a cinema, you'd select the next option. There's different standards below that. And then there's Netflix, Spotify, and YouTube. So for this example, we're going to go with the YouTube preset. And if you click on the Settings tab, it shows you that it has applied a target loudness of -14 LUFS, which is indeed what YouTube specify on their specifications for audio on their website. So if you go back to the Levels tab and play our audio, we can find out whether the audio is at the right level. Let's go. This tutorial, but before we get onto that, the first thing I wanted to talk about was the use of your equipment and the setup prior to recording, which is really important and will ensure that you get the best possible result. So you need to play it for a few seconds, maybe 10 to 15 seconds, and have a look at the leveled readings that you're getting. So you can see that we've got short-term, integrated, and loudness range, as well as true peak. So if you look at the short-term range, we're just under -14. Integrated is again at under -14, and momentary is at -20. So we can afford to go just a little bit louder based on the reading of the loudness meter. Going towards 0 is getting higher in volume, and going towards the -50 mark is going lower in volume. So the aim is to make our audio about 1 decibel louder. How do we do that? Well, we're just going to close this down for a moment, go back to our hard limiter tab, And you can see we've got an input boost of 1.2 decibels. We're going to change this to 2.2. Then we're going to click on our loudness meter again. Click on the play button. Then I grab the two SD cards, put them into the computer, and I synchronize the video with the audio file. And then I start editing the audio. So that's my process, my workflow for recording audio. Yours could be a little bit different to that. If you have an iPhone and you have an external Bluetooth microphone or a wired microphone. And there you go. As you can see, we have an integrated reading of around negative 14.9, true peak at 0, short term at negative 15 which means at times it does go a little bit lower in volume than the recommended negative 14, but only by that 1 decibel, which is better to be under than over. Then you can rest assured that you have the right level for your audio. At this point, you should be pretty satisfied with what you're hearing. If by chance there's something about the vocal that you feel needs improvement, I'm just going to add one more effect that you could consider, and that's the parametric equalizer. This can be found in the filter and EQ section. Click on Parametric Equalizer, double click on the effect, and you can use one of the presets, for example, Vocal Enhancer, and you can see it creates a curve that further refines the vocal. Then you can pick up points on the curve. So over here on the left-hand side, we're dealing with the bass range, the mid section, and moving towards the high end, including the very extreme treble sounds. So you can go in and add additional points if you really want to refine this curve, and you can make very subtle changes to the particular areas of the frequency. So if your voice is too bassy, you can bring some of this bass level down. If it's not bassy enough, you can increase it. If there's too much treble, or if there's some annoying noise that you couldn't filter out with the previous effects, you can go and adjust and bring these levels down or increase as needed. And this really is a matter of personal preference. There's no particular preset or recommendation here that's going to work for all voices. It's really a matter of listening to that vocal recording over and over and working out what areas need improvement in order to clarify the vocals. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to hit me up with a like and consider subscribing to the channel so that you're notified of up and coming video releases. And by all means, if you have any comments or questions, drop them in the comments box below. See you on the next one. Bye for now.